I mean, I know Son, you're the expert, but just in terms of, I guess, for younger, because when I was a younger athlete, things were a lot different then too. So I guess how do you kind of address that without having like a super cut and dry? I feel like there's a lot of stuff that's 100% cut and dry. This is what you have to do, and there's also like it doesn't matter. It's just about calories.
Yeah, for sure. I would say with post-workout fueling, there's like, I think an outdated information is it's like it has to be immediately, like within 5 minutes. And really now we know it's more within an hour or so. And basically just trying to get both carbs and protein is a good thing to tell your athlete. So I see a lot of like runners do protein powder with water. You're not really getting enough carbs to help replace what you just used up. And so you definitely need to have carbs in addition to protein. If you can get a meal within an hour, that's great. You don't have to do the protein shakes or things like that. But those can be a good tool if you're going, say, straight from a workout to a lift. That'll help you get more out of that lift session. I specifically remember in college, I didn't know that. And I would go from like a workout straight into a lift. And I was like, man, I can't even pick up these 20-pound dumbbells. And then I started drinking like a chocolate milk, and all of a sudden I could lift heavier. I felt better. And, I was able to gain more from that training. So a lot of athletes who are performance motivated, just reminding them this is going to help you get the most out of all this work that you just put in, and make sure you have those building blocks to build up your body in response to that training. But yeah, I would say ideally within an hour, both carbs and protein, and it can kind of vary. I don't know if you guys have any favorite post workout. One thing I will say with sometimes post-workout, you don't have an appetite, which can be normal. So liquids can be a good option, smoothies, chocolate milks, things like that, until your appetite comes back. Sometimes you just need to lower your core temperature and focus on getting something in, and then your body can kind of get your hunger cues back and you can eat more.
Yeah, I really struggle in the heat. So like in the summer when I'm doing like big training blocks, I'll finish like a long run or a workout or just high intensity and feel like I like could just throw up. And so it's really hard to get like immediate like fueling in, as Maddie was just talking about. So she's been a great resource. And so she was like, okay, you can't get solid foods in for a little bit, like right after something really intense. So she gave me all these like smoothie recipes, or even again, like chocolate milk. Like it's so simple. But sometimes just getting that in as quickly as you can after. So just finding things that you can stomach. But yeah, smoothies are my go-to in the summer. That's typically what I always do after like a big session.
Oh, ditto. Everything you said, yeah.
I told Chris today I don't usually like the flavor of protein shakes. That's like I just have a hard time with that. So I often have a chicken breast, which he found really funny, and some rice and some
The way you said it, like, I'd rather have a chicken breast.
Give me some meat. No, that's my preference, but I've learned that my stomach is different than a lot of athletes, so that works for me. So it's kind of weird to have chicken breast on hand, but I do. That's what works for me. Unconventional advice. I will say, like, being pregnant and nursing and trying to do any amount of training through that has like trained my stomach to be much more tolerant of any sort of food at all times. Because you get hungry and you just have to eat all the time. Like, yeah,
That's comforting.
yeah. Well, and then you're like sometimes nauseous and you got to eat anyway. All the things.
Yeah.
Super fun.
Sounds great.
Yeah, it's like marathon training.
So how much does all of this advice change once you go through perimenopause and
Yeah, it changes quite a bit. And I actually have quite a few athletes that I'm working with right now in that phase. And it can be really frustrating because you're prepared for your body to change in your teens. You're not necessarily prepared later in adulthood, and it can be very frustrating. There is a great book. Actually, Stacey Sims just released a new book specifically for menopause. I would highly recommend reading that. A lot of my athletes have found that super validating, just to know what's going on and understand more about it. The biggest thing is actually protein. You need way more protein. And so if a normal, younger athlete needs 20 grams of protein post-workout, when you're in that phase, you need about 40. So it goes up a lot. And that's to help maintain muscle mass. Also, the different types of training that you're doing can affect fat distribution differently, which can be frustrating to a lot of athletes. They're like, I'm doing all these long runs and I'm gaining weight. What's going on? That's just kind of a normal process that can happen at that time, just due to different hormones and higher cortisol levels. That stress hormone affects fat storage. So there's just a lot of different things to consider. But that book by Stacey Sims is a really great resource. I can't remember. It's not Roar. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I would definitely suggest it. Yeah, it's a really good resource, and a lot of athletes have really liked it.
This is not a nutrition question. I'm curious, all of you mentioned having mostly male coaches. Are you seeing more female coaches at this point within the sport? And what do you think needs to happen for more women to start coaching, especially at the higher level?
I think we're seeing more women coaches, and I think that they're when a woman coach gets hired, it seems like a really big deal. So that we're bringing attention to that. I don't know if the numbers are really changing drastically yet, and I hope that big change is still to come. But I think celebrating when a woman coach gets hired, kind of no matter how you feel about her personally or what, you know what I mean? Let's celebrate each other and let's promote women in sport, because I think like that's a key component that's missing. I mean, all of us didn't talk about our periods with our coaches until we were like 30. That's not okay. And now looking back on my career, I think about all the times where I didn't say something that maybe I should have because it was uncomfortable, and we just didn't talk about it, and how that might have benefited my career. So yeah, women obviously make that conversation more comfortable, and I'm all for equity in general. So
I mean, I'll speak to that as well. So as a male coach, I think it's interesting to, again, I'm in not my element, right? Talking about this, even though I've tried to educate myself, I'll never be as confident or as comfortable as a woman talking to a woman here, right? So I think there's this conversation, this narrative is what it takes to help more women get into coaching positions, because there's a pure need for it, right? It's not now, oh, should there be more? No, it's a necessity. It has to happen, right? So us having this conversation, that's kind of the point of this talk, was just to start this narrative, right? The narrative will then evolve and it'll change and impact more and more people.
So this is a half-baked question. I'm trying to figure out how to ask it. But
How to do a live stream? I'm just kidding.
yeah, how do you? So I mean, this is such good information, and I mean, I'm in my 30s now. I'm hearing a lot of this for the first time. How this is where the half-baked comes in. How can this information get out? Like, I just think of all these like high school cross-country girls. Like, again, I don't really know how you can sort of say, but how can this information get out? Because it's so good on a physiological, social, mental health level. So I didn't know if you guys had any. Again, it's not a really good question at all, but I mean, maybe the answer is like more things like this, because I mean,
Yeah, for me, it's just doing what I can with what I'm comfortable doing, which is stuff like this. So to each their own.
yeah, and like we have Instagram. There's tons of good accounts out there. I know McKenna Myler just did a series on periods, and it was really funny. It's like laughable, like TikToks, but it's on her Instagram too, and everybody should watch it. It was super informational.
who is that?
McKenna Myler.
Yeah, McKenna Myler.
I mean, I think Chris touched on it, like we're trying to initiate conversations with younger female athletes to empower them. So Chris mentioned, and it should be in the resources that we listed, but there's a platform called Voice in Sport. And it's solely there. It's an all female run platform. So female doctors, female psychologists, female dietitians, mentors, collegiate and professional athletes mentor young girls. And so again, it's there to kind of start having these conversations and start helping girls figure out how to talk about this and to normalize something that I feel like has never really been normalized before. And again, the more we can empower this next generation, I think hopefully that will ultimately start to change the women, like the roles in coaching, and we'll see more female coaches, more female agents, just again, like giving younger women kind of the advice and kind of the things that we're all learning now as older athletes. And there's so many resources that weren't there, 10, 15, 20 years ago that are there now that I think are really starting to change that narrative. And like Maddie and I, we coach at a high school here in Boulder. And I've been coaching for 11 years. And so again, just, trying to step outside of what I do just as an athlete and kind of now give back a little bit. And I think the more that we can all do that in the sport, and the more we can provide resources like this and all the other things that are out there, I think that's how you start to see the shift.
Should be your next facts on Strava.
Yeah. Perfect.
There you go.
Good idea.
So, Chris, this is turning towards you. You are obviously an educated guy and a coach. What do you recommend to people our age that they kind of know what they're talking about and not? Like, what would you tell guys to be mindful around this topic? Because teenagers probably don't care or not thinking about this, but guys in our 20s, 30s probably should be. Something that hasn't been said already.
I think it's as simple as before you talk or think you know what you want to say, ask a woman who you trust first. I was very lucky to grow up with my two cousins, both are women, and I was very close with them. And I would always consult them first when, if anything, regarding something about women that I didn't know. Like, hey, Christina and Maria, like, what do I do about this? Right. So don't assume we know anything. Just ask first. Efren?
Yeah. So one of the things I see in working with athletes is I get some people come in and they're looking for quick fix and often tend to get there's a lot of these supports, and then some of the people I see succeed only trade in short term gain for long term rewards. So I guess with that being said, what are some of the factors that have helped each of you achieve like consistency and longevity in your sport?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, for me, it's been the big breaks away from training and just embracing that and really enjoying my time off from sport. That's helped me in the long run, and just remembering to play the long game, that the short term, shortcuts rarely pay off.
Yeah, knowing that taking the break is just as important as the training, I think has been the most important piece of advice that I've been given. And just kind of modeling my career after certain women or athletes that have had long careers and seeing kind of what they do and trying to replicate that. And that has been, somebody like Desiree Linden, who had, she took probably 5 years to get to a point of running a decent marathon. And then she continued to train, but she would only do, a year. And she knew that was what she needed to do for her body. And I've kind of modeled my career after hers. Like, I know that I need to do 2 marathons a year in order to get the best out of myself and to not, go into a place of overtraining, and also taking those breaks. And that is what I think is going to work for me to have that long career. And that's my end goal, is to have longevity. So if your goal is to just pop off, a really fast race right away, then you're going to be very short-sighted. But if you want to be in this sport, and this sport has given me so much, not just, performance-wise, but just, in the experiences and all the people that I've met, that I want to be in this, field for as long as I can. So that's what motivates me, is just trying to be here and show up every day for as long as I can.
I've dealt with a lot of injury in my career. Sometimes it seems like one right after the other. And so learning how to reframe the injury, and yes, it's frustrating, and yes, it's heartbreaking, and more times than not, it comes at a very inopportune time. But reframing how you look at the injury, kind of as Sarah and Emma said, like looking at it as like, okay, I'm going to get a break. I'm going to get time for my body to rest and completely reset itself the way that it probably needs to and the way that it can't always when I'm training. And then reframing how you look at the rehab process as like, I'm still training, I'm still working towards the goal, but you're reframing the goal into smaller pieces as you recover from the injury. And so kind of letting go of that bigger picture for a little bit and focusing on like one little thing at a time. So, like celebrating the milestones as you kind of get healthy. So as you slowly are able to start doing exercises, or as you're able to get back into cross training, or as you're slowly able to walk, jog, again, just kind of reframing some of those setbacks that take you out of the sport, and giving yourself new little goals to get healthy and to do it the right way. As we've said, a lot of times with injury, people are looking for that shortcut back as quickly as possible. But I've, as I've gotten older and as I've dealt with big injuries as an older athlete, again, it's just trying to find the silver linings in that, and just knowing that as far as the long-term goals go, like this is something that could ultimately be a blessing in disguise. I was injured this spring, frustrated with an Achilles injury, so I wasn't able to run. What I did instead was I jumped into the gym with Chris, and we were able to like reset and completely reload my body in a way that I've never ever been able to with all the high intensity mileage and training. So then when I was finally able to put running back into the picture, I was stronger than I've probably ever been in my entire career. So injuries have a really funny way of just kind of showing us the silver linings and being those blessings that we can't always see in the moment, to ultimately having that longevity in your career. But it's just reshaping it and making sure you're coming back healthy and the right way. And oftentimes, every time I come off an injury or a setback, I'm an even better athlete than I was before the injury. So
For me, it's that balance piece. It's finding balance outside of running, things I enjoy outside of running, so that if something comes up and I do have to take some time off, I still have things that I enjoy and that I love. I am very fortunate in that I've actually only been injured one time since college, and it was in the peak of a lot of stress with school and stuff. So keep in mind, your body doesn't always know the difference between types of stress. So stress management has been a really big thing for me. A lot of athletes are type A, very high strung. I can very much relate to that. So finding ways to lower your stress levels and, find your self-worth outside of performance. And then as a dietitian, when you're injured, not restricting to try to avoid gaining weight. Usually injuries happen for a reason, and using that time to make sure your body is healthy coming back into the sport so it doesn't pop back up. Continuing to fuel, even though you're not training as hard, is really important. And, just valuing, again, your health over performance is going to get you a lot further in the sport than, like you said, just the one-time success.
So it's interesting. I think there's two kind of breaks that we talked about: voluntary and involuntary breaks, right? And I love using car analogies because it's relatable. If you think about going on a road trip and you have built-in brakes, right? You're going really far. Guess what? You have to stop and refuel for gas. You might have to involuntarily stop and take a piss, right? There's all these little stops built in along the way that you have to take, right? And it's no different with life. You're not just going to keep driving your car when the gas tank is empty. You physically can't, right? And sometimes these involuntary breaks are life being like, well, you can't do this anymore because your body's breaking down, right? So just taking note of that and being like, oh, I'm just on a road trip and it's time for a piss break. And I'm going to take that because you have to, right? Or I'm going to take a voluntary break. I'm going to stop, get some gas, get some snacks, go to the bathroom, blah, 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 so on and so forth, right? But it's just a good way to frame it like, okay, I'm just trying to get here, right? And along the way, I have a bunch of stops. Any other questions? I think that's it. Thanks for coming, guys. Yeah.